look, they changed their philosophy in the portal, and I like this one a lot better. It's not going to be there's real potential for that young man. No, they learned their lesson a year ago about the potential problem, and instead now want to see something that is certifiable, as in game tape. This is him scoring a touchdown against LSU. Broke that tackle, ran 52 yards. I like him. Let's see some more. That kind of things. So I don't know if there's anybody out there that's going to be in this window that you go, oh, they got to have that. If it's a defensive lineman who fits the bill, if it's an offensive lineman who fits the bill of the previous description that I just gave, meaning like you've done it in a game, we've seen you play well, all right, fine, I would do that. I would probably, once again, overpay and bring in a guy that I know has played big-time college football and had success in the trenches. I'm in on that. Not much else that I'm in on in terms of wasting money here. I would do it with the defensive line or the offensive line. That's about it. The Hakeim Williams departure comes as no surprise whatsoever. I don't think anybody is shocked to learn that Hykeem Williams is going to transfer. It never worked out. Now, I think I speak for everybody that is a Florida State fan in saying that in a weird way, he's emblematic of the problems they've had in development and the problems they've had in recruiting. They have swung and missed on a lot of players at key positions. And even when they've gotten one, and this was one that they were able to obtain thanks in large part to the battle's end, they failed to get the most out of him. They failed to develop him. They failed to see him have an impact on the program in any way, shape, or form. And we've had too many players come through here. You cannot be an elite program. You cannot operate at the highest levels and count yourself amongst the best teams in the country if you consistently screw it up in recruiting, whether that's transfer portal recruiting, whether that is prep recruiting. And he kind of is, again, emblematic of the swings and misses, of which there have been just too many. Hakeim Williams showed some promise pretty early on. We all remember the one touchdown in a game that obviously Florida State had the better players and was an overwhelming favorite and all that. But when he got on the field, he made a play, and you thought, okay, there's something there because he's got an NFL body type from day one. He had to lose a little bit of weight. He got here. He was a pretty big kid, still a big kid, but he got in shape. I really would have liked to have seen, and I hate this for him, and I don't know if ultimately it was maybe not the straw that broke the camel's back. I think the straw that broke the camel's back was last year's 2-10 season in which he didn't really do much of anything. But, going into that first game against Georgia Tech last year, Tom, that week of practice that I was there, he was sensational. He had a big play after a big play, finally looked healthy. You remember he was coming off the ankle. He had that issue from the previous year, and he looked like he was on the verge, and Mike was really pushing him. Mike was really on him. I think Mike realized it was almost there. It was about to happen. He was finally in great shape. He was working as hard as he needed to work at practice. Some of the disciplinary things, and I don't mean discipline as in he was a bad problem at practice or a malcontent. I mean discipline in terms of route running, putting the ball in the proper hand after you receive the ball, all these kinds of things, footwork, all of those things. It was starting to improve, and Mike was really, really, I think, pumped. And as fate would have it, about a 60-yard touchdown reception. He's going into the end zone. I'm watching him go into the end zone. They're getting ready to go off the practice field into the indoor practice facility. It's the last play in the outside grass area. He catches it, makes a great play, and as he's going into the end zone, seizes up, grabs his hamstring, falls to the ground. It's a non-contact injury. I'm watching it happen, and I just immediately felt crestfallen because I knew, as somebody who's hurt a hamstring, that his season was screwed, that you do not bounce back from that unless you're a freak like Dalvin Cook, and he's the lone exception to this rule that I've ever seen. but he was the lone exception to many rules as an athlete. Anyhow, very rarely do you aggravate, much less tear, a hamstring and bounce back to be anything close to what you can be in terms of twitchiness and speed, outright speed, all of that. It's very rare. It takes a long time. It is aggravating. We all know from our pro teams, when you hear about your starting wide receiver hurt in practice and you know, it's a hamstring, oh man, this is going to suck.
It's at least 6 weeks.
Yeah, he may not be right till we get halfway through the damn season. This isn't good. Well, I mean, last year, hell, Mike Evans had it happen, and it affected his play. He's such a badass that he still got over 1,000 yards, but he was not anywhere close to what he normally is because he was dealing with it in the playoff game. I watched it against Washington. He came off the field right off the bat. Anyhow, when that happened, I remember being devastated. And I said to somebody, I don't remember who was sitting there next to me on the beat, and I was like, that's a problem. That is a huge problem. He ain't getting up. I mean, he fell to the ground. It wasn't a slight little, ooh, better back off. I'm going to take tomorrow off. Let's give it a week. No, it was writhing, rolling around, couldn't get him to sit up. So you know it's a terrible pull. You know it's a tear. You know he's not going to bounce back. And he really never did. Never really did. And then you throw on, all the losses. You throw in all the losses. Then they go out and they get some receivers to come in. And I think he was kind of in the doghouse because the effort stuff was occasionally intermittent. You didn't have great days in succession a lot of times. And Mike began to ride him there. And I really believe, I could be wrong, but I really believe a lot of what you've heard Mike Norvell talk about today, this last 3 weeks, right, has been directed at him. I think it was an important camp for Hakeim Williams. And Mike knew it. You got new eyes in camp from an assistant coach standpoint, from a coordinator standpoint. You got new eyes looking at this kid, trying to see what he is and what he can be. Obviously, Mike played receiver himself. And so he knows, okay, look, this is it. It is make or break time. There were a few other guys I think that would be included in those assertions from Mike about you got to show me something. But I think Hykeem was number one on that list. And you could tell early. You could tell probably halfway through spring, Mike was pretty devastated. He wasn't getting the response from Hykeem that he was hoping for. Now, there might have been other players, again, under that umbrella, but I believe a lot of that was directed at Hykeem. And so it culminates with what we learned is after 2 seasons with Florida State, in which he largely did not a thing. This was a kid out of Fort Lauderdale that we were so excited about and thought, look, at 6'2", 6'3", 220, 215, he was going to do some things. You thought he was going to end up being a great player, but alas, it did not happen.
I remember his first year and his first camp here because, 5 stars in Florida State don't really meet that much in the last, 10 years. Doesn't happen very often. And a lot of my friends were asking, how's Hykeem looking in camp? And I remember our observation was that Vandravius Jacobs looked far more ready to play football at the collegiate level as a true freshman than Hykeem did. And I remember some of those texts that I had with my friends, and they said, you got to be kidding me. He's not ready? I'm like, no, the guy looks raw, man. He looks like somebody who is toolsy, but is a raw player.
Mm-hmm.
Vandravius, meanwhile, is somebody who's breaking off his routes with the incredible explosiveness.
Oh, he had skill.
Yes.
Another one that didn't work out.
Right. Yeah. And Jordan Scott spent 10 minutes here. So Destin Hill was on the verge, and then he got hurt. A devastating run at wide receiver for Florida State for a little while.
It can never happen, and it happens here too often.